Hello Mark, here we are at Belmont. Tell us a bit about the HS2 project.
Yeah, so High Speed 2 is a new high-speed rail network in the UK. It connects 8 of our largest cities. We're delivering it in 2 phases, phase 1 between London and Birmingham, and phase 2 between Birmingham, Manchester and Leeds. By the end of this year we hope to have the approval that we need to start construction for phase 1 next year and open phase 1 in 2026. The wider phase 2 network will open in 2033, so it's a long-scale, large infrastructure project.
So people may not appreciate this is actually going to be the largest infrastructure project in Europe?
That's right, yeah, it's a significant infrastructure investment. So phase 1 alone is 230 kilometres, half of that is in cutting and tunnel, 128 million tonnes of excavated material, close to 300 bridge structures, 31 main construction compounds in 299 satellite compounds, so it's a massive piece of infrastructure, and that's just phase 1.
What's the expected total spend?
There's a budget of about 55 billion, and that covers all of the infrastructure, the stations, the railway systems, the new rolling stock, so there's a lot of engineering involved.
When's completion expected?
Phase 1, 2026, will operate the London to Birmingham leg, and for the wider network, that's 2033 for connections to Manchester and Leeds.
A very long-term project, and therefore it's very important that we address the emissions.
That's correct.
Project.
Certainly, yeah. It's
in the construction phase and in its life cycle phase.
Yes, we're looking at the whole life carbon impact. So we've already undertaken an assessment of the carbon impact, looking at the construction. So where do the products come from? What are the emissions from their extraction and manufacture? The transportation of those to site. The construction emissions from activities to install and bring everything together, and then the rolling stock and stations in operation as well, and end of life as well, what happens then. So it's a whole life cycle assessment approach.
So tell us a bit about your role within the High Speed 2 project.
Yeah, so I work in HS2's technical directorate in the environment team, so we're responsible for developing the requirements, setting the strategy and the policy and the vision for carbon, and well, more widely, but specifically for carbon for me. And we're also responsible for making sure that that's integrated into our delivery processes. So we work very closely with colleagues across the business to make sure that it's in our procurement, it's in our innovation strategies, that we're part of the education programme as well, so that we can upskill in terms of carbon knowledge, awareness and skills and tools.
And what do you see as the main challenges facing the project?
Well, we're entirely reliant on our supply chain to deliver against the targets that we're setting. So we'll set ambitious carbon targets to create a step change in performance. We want to provide that leadership and that direction for the whole supply chain to then come together, work together to collaborate, innovate and deliver lower carbon solutions that we need to minimise our carbon footprint. Supply chain collaboration is key. We need everybody to be pulling in the same direction, to be aligned. We need leadership not just from ourselves but within the value chain as well, challenging up to us to question our targets and if we can be going further, and likewise we'll be doing the same with our supply chain, trying to push continual improvement. So we have an innovation programme and an education programme, so we're going out speaking to, engaging with our supply chain, telling them what our challenges are, trying to understand how they can support us, bringing together academia. We're also working a lot on education, so we're developing a National College for High-Speed Rail. So that's really trying to upskill engineering and railway systems, environment, bringing together a lot of skills to try and drive improvement and bring this innovation that we need. And we've been working with the supply chain to try and develop those. But we also do have stretching targets, and that's the space where we need the supply chain to come back and be able to work together in developing those solutions to meet those targets. We've been working with the Building Research Establishment to develop BREEAM infrastructure, and we're piloting that for our main civil packages. And that's an important tool. It's not everything, but it's a useful tool and a framework within which we can deliver some of our sustainability objectives. We also have a lot of requirements and standards and targets that sit around to complement that tool. But BREEAM and the likes of those assessment methodologies are a useful standardisation and to drive best practice across the industry. From a leadership perspective, we can do something as a client, we'll try and lead by example, but we need leadership within the supply chain, and initiatives like this are exactly what we need for the supply chain, the product manufacturers, to be doing their bit as well, up and down. So we're trying to keep everything performance and outcome based, so as long as we can meet our carbon targets, we don't mind how that's done, but it's going to need effort from everything. So we're going to first need to reduce how much excavated material, how we're moving, so we need some clever logistics there. We also need to think about, well, if we need to move things, then how do we do that with the most efficient sized vehicle? And we also need to think about what is the fuel, how is that being powered? So we're going to need to use a complement and a portfolio of all of those approaches to deliver the targets that we're setting. We were one of the first projects to integrate climate change into our environmental impact assessment. So for phase 1, we've undertaken a carbon assessment, and that's looking at up to about 6 million tonnes of carbon for construction and between 2 and 3 million tonnes for the operation of phase 1. And now that we understand our carbon footprint, we're using that as a tool to identify hotspots, to develop our action plans, our strategies, and where we can direct innovation capacity to best minimise our carbon footprint. So now that we have a better understanding of our carbon footprint, we can take that forward, engaging with the relevant parties and our entire supply chain to deliver those reductions. High-speed rail is a low-carbon mode of transport, so it does bring some carbon benefits. We can transfer passenger journeys and freight journeys from road onto rail, which will deliver a carbon benefit. And ultimately, we have a good carbon benefit in that respect, but we do have a substantial carbon footprint from construction and operation. So we're doing everything that we can to minimise that as far as we can, looking at every option and trying to drive down carbon, drive down cost, and deliver a value for money, sustainable railway.